What you're about to hear now is just one episode in a bigger series, full of secrets and mystery. If you haven't followed the beginning yet, I advise you to go back to the first parts so you can understand every detail and realize how much more dangerous what's coming is. Are you ready to face what lies beneath the water? In the depths of a dark lake, amid the fog, and on a night history we'll never forget, something appeared, something the human mind cannot comprehend. And now, the world knows nothing. No pictures, no evidence. Only we saw and only we barely survived. We thought the story was over, but we were wrong, because the nightmare hasn't even begun. I said as I tucked my body into the fireplace. What a strange question. I'm not going to Disneyland anyway. She said in terror, her body trembling. Wouldn't it be wise to wait until we tell my father? I looked at her meaningfully and said, My angel, I'm not one of those strong-willed people who find a secret passage in an old Scottish castle and then hesitate to enter it. It's stronger than me. She shouted sharply, Wait, I'm coming with you? I have to make sure you don't die. But before I could understand, we had already entered the well, she and I, descending the rocky steps, while I was careful that the flame of the candle wouldn't catch the edge of her dress. Fortunately, there weren't many steps. At the bottom of the well, there was a long cellar, reeking of dampness. Clang! What was that sound? And what was the mystery behind the sudden darkness that filled the cellar? Maggie raised her head upward, then said, Nothing. The stone wall has closed behind us. What a fool I am! The door must have stayed open for a limited time before closing. Why didn't I keep her outside, or put something to block the wall from shutting? They always remember these details in the movies, but I'm not a movie hero and I wasn't trained for this sort of thing. And now, here we are, standing in this unknown cellar, with no weapon and no source of light except this candle. I said, Maggie, my angel, I'm afraid we're in real trouble. Her eyes sparkled in the dark under the candlelight. Then she clapped her hands cheerfully and exclaimed, This is the most wonderful experience of my life. Imagine, you and I in this terrifying cellar, together, feeling our way along the walls, trembling, walking through the mud among the corpses of rats and the bones of those before us. Then hunger and thirst take hold of us, and then you tear yourself apart for my sake, taking off your shirt to shield me from the cold. Then I die and breathe my last in your arms. Isn't that wonderful? What a complete fool you are. Women have a strange ability to find romance in situations that, for men, mean nothing but disaster. Then she continued in fascination. And after hours, you die from grief over me, and our bodies decay, and after hundreds of years, when someone discovers this tomb, they'll find two skeletons, their hands intertwined, and when they try to separate them, they crumble into dust. I said mockingly, Yes, like Esmeralda and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? Yes, we read it. It's touching enough to make one cry. I didn't know what to do. Should I strangle her? Tear her apart? Or just punch her in the teeth? I settled for saying, There's still some time left before this wonderful ending, so I think we should move now. This place isn't romantic enough to die in, she said, having regained her composure, while looking upward, but there must be an exit on this side. I replied, That makes sense. Whoever invents a way to enter surely invents a way to leave. So she and I began feeling the stones of the wall, one by one, pressing on every protrusion that could move. We stomped the floor with our heels in every spot. I even climbed back up the stairs to examine the wall again, but to no avail. Maggie said, her face now serious again, If we keep up these clumsy attempts, we'll surely die. It seems we have no choice but to walk through this passage to its end. But what about the candle? Then she took a silk handkerchief from her dress pocket, moistened it with her saliva, rolled it into a ball, and kept it in her mouth for a few minutes. After that, she brought it close to the candle flame, and it began to burn very slowly because of the moisture. Then she said confidently, There. Now extinguish your candle until we really need it. I said in admiration, Who taught you that trick? She replied, holding the burning handkerchief delicately by its edge and placing it over a piece of bone. In the last World War, housewives in London and Paris, trying to save energy, used damp newspapers to light their stoves. One newspaper was enough to cook a whole family's meal. I was 13 years old at the time. Ah, my dear, how can I play the role of the man who protects when it seems you are the one who will protect me? In silence, we made our way over the rough ground. Rats ran freely around us, and stagnant puddles covered the floor, seemingly formed by centuries of dampness. I will never forget our somber walk. She was a step ahead of me, holding the glowing handkerchief that cast mysterious shadows around her. How those shadows frightened me, as if they came from another world, leading me to sights no man had ever seen before. Did Dante feel as I did when Beatrice led him through the darkness of the other world? And then we began to see what she had jokingly predicted moments ago. Human bones scattered carelessly among the rocks, mixed with the bones of rats. I didn't want to tell her what that meant. There was no way out of this cellar. Those poor souls had tried before us and failed. They ate the rats alive, and then the rats ate them alive. No doubt this cellar was once a dungeon where the lord of the castle threw his enemies, leaving them to rot alive. But Maggie was clever, frighteningly clever. That's why she said to me in sorrow, "Rifat, do you know what I think? Yes, we will not get out of this cellar alive." The predicament. The problem with the first-person style I use in my storytelling is that it automatically reassures the reader that I will escape every predicament I get into. Otherwise, what life would I have lived to tell it in my own voice? If I wrote in the third person, like he went, he ran, he feared, the reader would not be so certain of my safety. Yes, I admit that I have survived all the crises of my life up to this moment in which I write, and I admit that I have never died until today. But what terror and what panic I have gone through in all those scrapes. Take, for example, our walk in the dark cellar behind Maggie, the handkerchief's flame dancing, mysterious shadows playing over the scattered skulls here and there, as if they were moving and smiling. How do you expect me to assume we will survive? The scenes repeated themselves, and we must have walked a full kilometer in that endless cellar when Maggie stopped, whispering and panting. I cannot walk any further. She sat down in her elegant dress and took off her shoe, and she said, "I am dying of cold even though it's July." I answered her, "It's because of the damp." I sat beside her on the ground, took off my shirt and laid it over her shoulders, and said with a touch of gloating, "Romantic, isn't it?" She snapped angrily, "Shut up." Then she added with disgust through her teeth, "We'll have to learn to eat rats." I shuddered at the horror of the idea, and swallowing, I said, "I'd rather wait a week without eating until I can accept the idea." She said as if spitting, "If you hadn't been reckless and gone into that damned secret door, we wouldn't be here." I answered sharply, "And if you hadn't followed me foolishly, you would have saved me." She curled up like a cat and pressed against me, saying, "We'll wait here until morning. Put out that handkerchief because we won't need it for now. I hope you have enough matches." Of course, very few. A story is always like that. People who own full boxes of matches never lose their way in dark passages. What rotten luck you are. I extinguished the handkerchief, curled up, and began to humming, quietly and off-key, a sad Arabic song. In the dark, I heard her steady breathing beside me. The poor thing had fallen asleep. When we woke, the luminous hands of my watch pointed to 9 in the morning. She was sitting, threading her fingers through the strands of her messy hair, trying to arrange it somehow. I smiled sarcastically and said, "There goes, starting her day." She said, sleep still in her voice, "If I look like you when I wake up, you tramp, then I think we should never marry. What have our children done to deserve parents who look so terrifying?" I was about to reply with a cutting retort until I noticed something and shouted at once, "Yesterday, I couldn't see my hand the same way. Did you notice? I saw you and I saw myself. The darkness is less dense in the daytime," she said, "and that means that some light is entering this cellar from somewhere. It is still very faint, but it exists and we will find it." So, without breakfast and without washing our faces, we rose confidently and continued our walk without needing to light anything. There was no doubt that the light increased with every step we took forward. Suddenly, we encountered something we had not yet accounted for.
الوسط يبدو أوسع. يمكن يوصلنا للداخل.
احذر، أي صوت غريب ارجع فورا.
تمام. انتظري هنا. بسم الله.
The corridor branched into 3 narrower passages, all bathed in the same dim light. What a problem. We chose the middle passage and walked with it for a while until it branched into 2 passages. Here I grabbed her hand to stop her from continuing and said, "No, this is turning into a real maze in which we will be lost forever. We must be organized. First, we will follow the famous Theseus method. And who is he? He is the Greek hero who entered the labyrinth on the island of Crete to kill the Minotaur, that beast whose upper half was a bull and lower half a man. Theseus tied a thread at the entrance of the labyrinth so he would always know the point to return to, and thus he did not end like those before him. So, we will mark the walls by carving lines that indicate the passages we have passed. Second, we must separate so each of us explores one branch of these 2 alone, on the condition that we meet again in 2 hours, no matter what." Maggie said, "And whoever finds an exit must, on the way back, draw wavy lines so they differ from any lines drawn in other passages." "All right, then. Hand me my pen from my shirt pocket." I broke my pen in half so both pieces could be used for scratching on the walls, handed her one half, then wished her good luck, and we parted ways. Now I must hurry. I chose the right passage, which led me to 2 others. I chose the right one again, and walked along it for some time until I found it blocked by a stone wall. I went back to the branching point and chose the left passage, walked for a few minutes until I reached a point where it branched again into 3. I chose the middle one, and so on. You can imagine how complicated it all became. It's exhausting even on paper, let alone walking all that time over jagged rocks, breathing heavily while the broken tip of the pen cuts into your fingers. What kind of mad, sadistic mind could have designed these tunnels? Half an hour passed while I wandered through this labyrinth, and suddenly I noticed footprints. Clear footprints on the soft dust that had begun to cover the stones. Footprints that weren't mine nor Maggie's. They were far too large. I began following the prints, without forgetting to mark my lines, and my heart trembled. They couldn't belong to one of those decomposed dead bodies, for they were fresh and recent, and their owner was wearing modern shoes. The light grew stronger and stronger. And finally, there it was, what I had been searching for. An opening in the rock, barred by steel rods that someone had thankfully sawn through, and through it poured the light I had seen in the gloomy cellar. I moved closer to the window to see what it overlooked. Through the rocky gap, droplets of water sprayed gently. It was Loch Ness itself, lying before me in the bright morning sun, the most beautiful sight my eyes had ever seen. Beneath the window lay the shore's rocky edge, and at some distance stood a grim-looking rock standing alone amid the waves, caring neither for them nor for me. And upon the rock stood an old wooden pillar, from which hung frayed ropes. It wasn't hard to recognize that this was the rock of sacrifice that Sir James had told me about yesterday. Yesterday? Was it really only yesterday? In any case, I had found what I was looking for, and all that remained was to retrace my steps, drawing wavy lines over the straight ones I had made before, and wait for Maggie at the first branching point. Then we would leave this place together. I reached the point where I had started, and it was nearly 11 o'clock. I sat down on the ground to wait for Maggie, humming that same sad Arabic song, thinking about what I had just discovered. It was clear that this passage had once been completely sealed off by those dreadful bars. It had been a true tomb for anyone unfortunate enough to fall into it. Then came that good man who removed the bars, granting himself a chance at escape, and to enter the mansion whenever he wished, allowing him to reach Loch Ness easily and secretly, unaware that he was granting us a chance at life. Who is that person? And what is his purpose? I don't know, nor do I care to know at the moment. But my thoughts had carried me far away, and I hadn't noticed how quickly time had passed. It's now 11:30, and Maggie hasn't returned. Are the passages that intricate, or did she foolishly forget to mark her path? Or perhaps some danger, a pit, a fallen rock, has delayed her? Snakes of anxiety gnawed at my heart, and there was no choice but to follow her. I rose from my place and began to walk cautiously along the corridor she had taken. Her markings were neat, clear, and organized on the wall, so much so that I could almost picture her crystal hand tracing them 2 hours ago. A strange feeling, both nostalgic and ominous, swept over me toward those marks, as if the one who drew them would never return. The network of tunnels was indeed complicated, but I kept following the unbroken lines, except that, am I imagining things? No. Those scattered red drops on the ground could only be real. It was Maggie's blood. What you have just heard is only one chapter of a long novel, a journey that has not ended yet, and secrets that have not all been revealed. In the upcoming parts, you will find the truth becoming more mysterious and the events more thrilling. So be ready, because the story has not spoken its final word yet.